Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode, at the suggestion of one of our listeners, Steve Winyard, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating an Earthbound horror. Yay! Hello, Steve. I hope I've pronounced your last name correctly, and I know you wanted the Earthbound to inhabit a location, but hopefully you won't be too disappointed with what I have in mind, even though it's going to inhabit an improvised reliquary. Let's get right to it. The first thing to consider is the concept and feel or mood. What type of fear do I want this monster to evoke throughout the game? My answer to that is deception and fear of addiction. I want this monster to pretend to be a messiah figure that leads only to gradual degeneration, weakening, and destruction. And I want them to evoke the fear of discovering something seemingly beautiful and fun that ultimately becomes the sole reason for getting up in the morning, the only release, a total addiction, which forces the addict into increasingly more traumatic and hurtful situations. In light of this, our Earthbound is actually going to be named something like addiction, desire, tendency, impulse, propensity. Using Google Translate really quick, I discovered that in Swedish, the term I'm looking for is böjelse. So the character's name is going to be Böjelsiel, his celestial name. Now, I had written 2 pages of detailed backstory just for who the character was before the fall, but really, it might not even come up at all during the game, since the protagonists probably won't uncover that kind of information too early, so I narrowed it down to bullet points. Originally known as the Principality of Imagined Potential, this Elohim was responsible for creating dreams, as a means of slowly awakening mortals to their divine potential. He worked with the Angels of Patterns and the Architects of Paths to forge special pocket dimensions where each mortal could explore their desires and feelings in perfect intimacy. No Elohim could travel to that realm after it was sealed because the procedure to accessing a dream chamber required individual unconscious travel. Angels don't sleep and are never unconscious, so bam, this realm was off limits to them. It was destined for humanity alone. Our antagonist joined the rebellion and was named Defiler. The breaking of paradise after the long night also affected dreams. Humanity, who is now mortal, was showing signs that the dreams were no longer individual or intimate, and that the chambers had smashed into one another, creating a larger, unpredictable dream realm. Later on, the first murder also corrupted that place and infected it with a form of raging primal fear. Effectively, the first murder gave birth to nightmares, which grew to encompass a wide variety of fears. Our character joined Asmodeus's Silver Legion in the hopes of fixing humanity's dreams, but became disenchanted and tired with the lack of progress, so he decided simply having mortals worshipping him is enough. A breakthrough was made way too late, when the Defiler found a way to influence mortals' dreams in the sense that it allowed him to haunt the dreams of loyalist humans, either gathering intel or shattering their sanity, but that was immediately followed by the legions being rallied back to Genhinnom under Lucifer's command. During the shattering and the time of Babel, the character's hopes of fixing the realm of dreams and aiding or otherwise elevating mortals really took a fall. Shortly after, the rebels were imprisoned in the pit. Our Defiler was first summoned back to the earth sometime in antiquity by a mage whose name was lost to the tides of time, a mage who wanted nothing but to force our character into giving up as many secrets as possible, secrets related to dreams and such. After he got everything he wanted, he plunged the Defiler back into the pit. Needless to say, this incident made our rebel reconsider his stance on humanity. They were not to be elevated or awakened. The result of a mass awakening of humanity's potential would result in the enslavement of all fallen. It is at this point the character vowed to keep humanity ignorant, keep them living in fantasy worlds and consuming mindlessly. He resurfaced much later, during the age of Victorian spiritualism, when a group of wealthy and quite experienced occultists happened to stumble across translations of a certain mage's notes. For most people, these would have looked like a treatise on lucid dreaming and astral projection, but they could tell some elements resembled a ritual of summoning. Our Earthbound is pulled from the pit once again, and making use of the summoner's inexperience with true names, he manages to trick all of them and turn them into his pawns. More than a century later, due to the Defiler's inexperience with worldly things and his constant desire to experience sensation by possessing his thralls in a very indiscreet manner, his reliquary would be destroyed by mortal hunters. Having been pulled from the pit twice already, the character mustered enough strength to latch onto an improvised reliquary, which, in this case, was an object of much desire for a certain community, something that would allow the exploration of virtual spaces and fantasies of all kinds, kinda like dreams. Now, I know this console, whose name I shall not mention, was released on different dates in Japan, North America, Europe, and Australia, and storytellers should consider this depending on where their game is set. But yeah, the Defiler found a temporary home in what I will call the first series of X-Station Wiis available to the public, which should be in 1995. Ciel was drawn to the console and possessed it right before the release event, as a lot of gamers were queuing outside the store. Some young adult took this demonic console home that night and... Wait, let me quickly explain what I've done so far mechanically. We have to allocate 8, 6, and 4 points in the attribute columns. For this character, I've prioritized social, followed by mental, leaving physical for last. As a Defiler, physicality was never his thing, since the character's main game is fantasy and desire, things which he will manipulate in order to enslave mortals. After he's seen what the Awakened can do, the first time he was summoned, he just wants to keep humanity consuming and living in a state of perpetual fantasy, living in fictional worlds instead of achieving their true potential in the real world. So both nature and demeanor are enslaver. I've named the concept Master of Puppets because, hey, that's what this demon is going to do, working through his network of mortals and his retinue of minor fallen, and, well, because that song is really awesome and quite trendy right now. Let's get some abilities in there as well. We have 17, 12, and 7. If there's one thing this Defiler can do, is persuade mortals that doing its bidding is mutually beneficial. So the talents column goes first, and a subterfuge of 3 is a must. Next, we're going to throw 12 dots into knowledges, since the character was once a researcher of the Silver Legion, and even after returning to the mortal world, its appetite to consume knowledge is quite great. Finance is something this being acquired from its previous cultists, the wealthy occultists, as well as his understanding of medicine, mortal religions, literature, and so on. Whenever this character is given the opportunity, he loves doing research, constantly finding new mortal desires and trends it can exploit. In terms of virtues, I really think this Earthbound would be equally greedy in obtaining knowledge, feeding emotion, and experiencing physical sensation, so we're just going to go 1 point in each urge, bringing them all at 2. We also record the character's willpower, which is equal to the sum of 2 highest urges. Do keep in mind that whenever the character manifests their visage or possesses a thrall, urge ratings are added to their corresponding attribute columns. So when Boelciel manifests his apocalyptic form, all of his attributes go up by 2, since the urge of the flesh adds 2 to all physicals, the urge of emotion adds 2 to all socials, and the urge of thought adds 2 to all mentals. This character is really powerful already, but let's throw some lores into the mix. We have 10 dots of lores to distribute among house lores and the 2 common lores, with none being higher than the character's primary. Because the character changed quite a bit throughout his history, and during the war he enjoyed being close to humanity and being worshipped, I'm going to say his primary lore is that of transfiguration, since he embodies people's desires and seeks to trap them within their own fantasies. I do want a fairly balanced build here, and I want the character to also work regardless of where the chronicle takes place. Anywhere in the world, right? So we're going to do 4 dots in the lore of transfiguration, 3 in the lore of longing, 2 in the lore of storms, and 1 in the lore of humanity. What this is going to do is allow the character to speak and understand any language, and also present itself in a much more pleasant form using the lore of transfiguration. Okay, now we have to choose 8 apocalyptic forms by spending 16 form points. Face of Terror is a feature that all Earthbound receive, so that one is already on the sheet. For the others, I went with a point buy system, resulting in 6 form features. So I spent 16 form points even though I only have 6 actual forms. I went with the Host, Multiple Eyes, Aura of Misfortune, Disperse, Venom, and Alter Size. So the character can puke forth willpower draining venom. It causes enemies to botch upon rolling both 1 and 2. It has 360 vision and -2 to all perception rolls. It has mouths all over its body, and the successful grapple, or in this case a roll attack, you will understand soon, inflicts strength +3 aggravated damage. It can shrink to 1/3 of its normal size, and finally, because of Disperse, it can instantly dissolve its body into a swarm of maggots, spiders, or other small creatures like rats. Being able to attack using swarm rules, which can be found in the book, and dealing aggravated damage. Really, really good. Now we have to choose our character's grotesqueries. 8 of them, and we get Unspeakably Hideous for free, so that one is already written down. Now brace yourselves, this is going to get really nasty. I chose the following: no arms, no legs, no head, unstable, extra faces, eyes, mouths, and genitalia. What this means is the apocalyptic form of this demon is a giant pulsating ball of faces with multiple eyes, fanged mouths, and genitals of all kinds scattered throughout its surface. Features that swell uncontrollably and unpredictably. It rolls around in a disgusting manner. And hey, because of the lore of Transfiguration 4, it can look like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Encouraging you to indulge your darkest desires with it. I need a shower. Okay, now we record Starting Faith, which for the Earthbound is 4 as opposed to the usual 3. And we can go ahead and finally talk about my very favorite section, backgrounds. We have 10 points to spend, and we need to keep in mind that some of the regular backgrounds are not available to Earthbound characters. Things like contacts, fame, followers, or mentor. Makes sense, right? Instead, these are replaced by Codex, Cult, Horde, Mastery, Thralls, and Worship. I'm going to say this Earthbound doesn't have the biggest of cults, and its improvised reliquary is barely enough to keep it anchored to the world while storing a bit of additional faith. But it makes up in Thralls and Demon Servants. We're going to give this Earthbound 3 Thralls, which will be examined later, 2 points in both Cult and Worship. This way the demon is worshipped by a small cult of 20-30 people twice a month, gaining 4 points of faith from each ritual. We're also going to give it Horde 1, that way its reliquary can store additional 15 temporary faith points besides the demon's own faith pool of 4. Mastery 1 because it can enhance its evocations using its stores of faith, and finally Codex 1, which means the Earthbound knows the true names of the ones he closely worked with during Edenic times and can summon them. I'm going to say with a rating of 1 in the Codex background, this monster has 2 other fallen under his control. The Malefactor Shirax, an Architect of the Paths, and the Defiler Morfigor, also known as the Ever-Changing. These fallen were summoned by him and his previous cult a little while before hunters discovered them, destroying his cult, but his servants were left untouched, because malefactors are great at escaping. When it comes to thralls, the first one, known only as Player 1, is the mortal leader of the cult. He is the unfortunate young adult who took the console reliquary home in 1995. Over the course of a few nights, Beelziel discovered this naive individual's hidden desires and manifested his form using the lore of transfiguration to appear as a certain very sexy video game character. You can imagine this poor guy's amazement at seeing his favorite character coming to life and asking him for help. Like any good little knight, he did his best to save the princess imprisoned in the console, and thus became blinded by his own fantasy. The second and third thralls were recruited by Player 1 and Beelziel's fallen servants after they'd relocated to another city. The second thrall, known as the Chain, was nothing but a beat-up, small-time weed dealer who fancied himself a big shot. Player 1 introduced him to the malefactor Shirax, and together they created a very discreet and very safe network of paths that enabled them to both acquire and redistribute some more serious narcotics while easily evading law enforcement. Competition just couldn't keep up and didn't manage to take out the Chain, even though they tried, so in about a year or so this small-time dealer became exactly what he'd always dreamt of, through pretty much zero merit of his own. He is now the head of a very powerful network of drug dealers, making a small fortune for his master's cult every day. The third thrall is currently known as Queen Bee because of her preference for wearing yellow and black. It's hard to imagine that this fierce, gorgeous madam who wears only the most expensive brands and runs a very successful escort business was just a mangy street hooker a few years ago. When Morfigor offered her a new face and the possibility of a luxurious life as a powerful woman, she took the offer without a second thought, even though she'd been made fully aware that she would be delivering other girls into a life of prostitution. She didn't care. She took the deal, the luxury, and the power. Hey, it's not like her girls aren't well looked after, right? Alright, before venturing deeper into the inner workings of Beelziel's cult, we still have 21 freebies to distribute. According to the expense chart, we are going to spend 10 freebies on 2 more lores, opting to go for some of the black knowledges. 1 dot goes into the lore of violation, which now means that our Earthbound can plague mortal targets with horrible, horrible nightmares from miles away, making them frighteningly compliant and susceptible to his nocturnal suggestions. I think the being who created dreams should have at least 1 dot in this lore. The other dot goes into the lore of contamination, which means that our Earthbound can focus its consciousness through tainted, demonic objects and is thus able to explore the world through, say, a necklace, a ring, or other video game consoles that might be in your home right now. It can now be in multiple places, and its senses are no longer confined to its reliquary. We will justify acquiring this lore by saying it's an extension of his experiments with possessing thralls, which is what led to his previous cult being discovered and his reliquary destroyed. Beelzebub has grown to be very discreet as a result of that experience and tends to possess human hosts very rarely. Good. We'll also throw in 5 more freebies for another point of faith, so the rating goes up to 5, and the temporary faith maximum goes up to 20. 5 being stored in the demon's own form, and 15 being stored in the memory card of this improvised reliquary. Another 4 freebies will be used to buff both alertness and awareness from 2 to 3, since the demon can project his consciousness through objects, which I imagine makes him quite perceptive. And the final 2 will go into willpower, bringing it up to 6. But hey, this is an antagonist. You're the storyteller here. If you feel like your Earthbound's deranged might isn't exactly reflected in the starting stats, you can add a few more dots just fine. What players don't know can absolutely hurt them after all. Alright, mechanically the sheet is done, though the Earthbound really worked through their cults and thralls, so I'll need to make some thralls sheets as well, but I already have an idea of how this little network currently functions. The thralls are going to have high resources backgrounds, and a lot of them will make use of the first evocation of the lore of longing taught to them by Morfigor, because the Earthbound could have only taught them the high torment version. They're the kind of people who always seem to know what others want and get their way most of the time. What I need to consider is that Earthbound thralls can purchase a very wide variety of powers as the master shapes their faith into the desired result, so each can get their own little perks, but they also bear 3 points of stigmata. This is very important. 3 points of stigmata. Looking at the stigmata list, I will opt for feeding requirement and major physical mutation. The feeding requirement, which the thralls need to consume to stay alive, will be blood, because I want this cult to be of interest to both kindred and the fallen, making the antagonist suitable for crossover chronicles. The major physical mutation will be a secret little face that grows through and out of the character's skin in various locations on their bodies, as a reference to the song Secret Face by the band Death. Oh wow, I sure like references, don't I? Anyhow, for player 1, this face will be on his thigh, making him walk in a strange, very easily recognizable fashion, even though his appearance can change when the lore of transfiguration is involved. For the chain, his face will be growing right from the back of his head, thus he always needs to wear a hoodie or some kind of hat that hides his head. For Queen Bee, it will be growing from her back in between her shoulder blades, so that any protagonist being seduced by this character won't actually see anything wrong unless they attempt to run their fingers down her spine. Given that this is a somewhat detailed update to an antagonist I've used in the past, I can tell you the face and the back actually worked like a charm and freaked the hell out of one of my players who had been seduced by Queen Bee and was somewhat under her intoxicating influence. Now, here comes what I think is the best part. Where is this cult located? How do they operate? Allow me to introduce you to Neverrealm, a witty combination between Netherrealm and Neverland, or so I thought a few years ago when I first created this character. Neverrealm is a fantasy land, frequented by children, teens, and adults alike. It has some kind of playful fantasy to offer to everyone, designed to keep them consuming and coming back for more, day after day. It's a collection of separate buildings like a university campus, acquired and renovated between 1998 and late 1999, just as the abyss broke and the fallen started coming out of the pit. Rumors have it that Player One's project for these buildings was so good that the previous owner happily donated them to his cause. I'm sure the mind-shattering nightmares had nothing to do with the generous donation. So what Neverrealm is, it's the ultimate playground. The largest building and the very first that was opened has an arcade and an internet cafe where video game lovers can play anything they want at a really low price. It has a splendid food court where gamers can enjoy any kind of food, and the pièce de résistance, special thematically decorated rooms for all your pen and paper roleplay needs. You can enjoy any virtual world while being completely immersed in it. Sounds, light, visuals. Why, you can even pick out costumes from the wardrobe and wear them to fit the role of your protagonist better than ever. To top it all off, the staff, they're all in cosplay, all the time. Rumor has it that a few select regulars can even enjoy some very private LARP sessions with the staff. The cosplay is just amazing. In the next building, you can only enter if you're 18 or over and only in the evening. This is where the strip clubs and bars frequented by mean people are. Name your poison, any poison, they have it. The girls here are a real delight, and call me crazy, but a lot of them sort of look like celebrities you've seen on TV. I don't know what trick of light and makeup that is, but it has guys swarming like flies around a corpse. On the other end of the hallway, accessed through a completely separate entrance, there's another place where lonely, wealthy women can spend long romantic evenings with the gorgeous and very respectful hosts. Oh yes, the illusion of being loved and pampered and cared for has never been so accessible. Just behind those doors and a brief transaction away, it will make you feel like you're the most important creature in existence. But then you go home and look in the mirror and you can see those wrinkles and receding hairline maybe. All of those inesthetic imperfections. Which is why the last building is a cosmetic and plastic surgery clinic called the Fountain of Youth. Very good doctors, 100% accredited. No scars, no unsatisfied patients. On adjacent streets and all around this neighborhood, almost on every corner, you can get the really good stuff if you just know who to talk to. And if you don't want to get out of bed for your loving, don't worry, Queen Bee will have your package delivered right to you. All endings are happy endings when it comes to Neverrealm. Reality is cruel and hard, but this place, it can make your dreams come true. It's safe. It's all you want and more. What most people don't know is that some lucky bastards get services for free, especially when it comes to gaming. The owner is an avid gamer, they call him Player One, you know? So it makes sense he gives kids some extra time on the house. But secretly, the hours are all paid for using drug money. It's all one big money laundering scheme. They have so much cash, they're rolling in it. Officials can be bribed, permits can be bought, all the wheels are greased just the way they need to be. And every 2 weeks, the select few whose lives have been completely changed by Neverrealm, those people who were taken off the streets and given jobs, those kids who were left to live out their fantasies at their leisure, making a solid buck off of just having a good time. Those deform who were reshaped into the image of their dreams. All of these people descend into the bowels of Neverrealm's underground behind doors marked staff only, accompanied by their priests. And they show gratitude to their sponsor in hours-long, exhausting, sickening rituals. They've never seen this entity called BLCL, but now they know it can make their dreams come true. What's a few hours of discomfort every month when you can get what you want every day? It's a good deal. And well, when the carrot doesn't work, there's always the whip, the night terrors that will ensure everyone keeps quiet and does as they are told. So the cult, adequately named the Lost Children, seeks to expand while staying under the radar, a difficult task which will require careful maneuvering. Of course, this is where more names come into play. BLCL is in the process of acquiring a fiend he can control completely. All he needs is a suitable host. And bam, that's how I wrote an Earthbound that is very tongue-in-cheek about video games, well, games in general, with a lot of references to things I like, somewhat inspired by my mom's constant reminders that these games are bad for me and they'll turn me into a mindless consumer zombie who's wasted his life. No desire is left unexploited, so you can see why this really freaked my players out, with some of them wanting nothing more than to destroy this cult completely, and others actually falling under the sway of the Lost Children. If I may offer some tips for anyone who might want to run this character or a similar character, have Neverrealm in the background at all time when the protagonists are making pacts or going for a nightly feeding, if they are kindred. Have it be the thing kids are always super excited about. Posters and filthy alleyways. Have kids sneaking out of their houses in the middle of the night and parents protesting this arcade the next day. It cannot be shut down. It's a machine that cannot be stopped legally. Put it on the news and just let your players interact with it if they want to. If they poke around, the important staff members probably have the lore of longing, so they know if anyone is trying to snoop around or somehow hurt the business. But show your players Neverrealm as mortals see it, as an awesome place dedicated to play and games like we only dreamed of as kids, and then show them a little crack in the mask. Then another. If they get suspicious, give them a name and have them invoke BLCL, who tells them he's on the run from a monstrous earthbound demon who's controlling the other fallen of the city, which is why he cannot meet them in person. Make them paranoid, make them doubt everything they know about everyone, about the local court. BLCL will have his defiler, but mostly his malefactor, showering the protagonists with powerful relics and gifts in exchange for their discreet services in helping him root out the Earthbound controlling the local court. Make them feel like heroes, like they're joining the group of good guys and making the world a better place for everyone. Look at how happy the mortals in Neverrealm are. It's a Faustian dream. Look at how we're fighting the Earthbound according to Luciferian creed. BLCL is good, he's the good guy. Right? And then, maybe using an NPC, Show a little crack in Boelciel's mask. Have him hurt one of his thralls. Have ambulances show up at the arcade. Have the kids talking about nightmares. Or maybe he even hurts one of the protagonists, unable to keep up the charade, losing his patience with tricking the characters. His goal this entire time was just to get them to interact as much as possible so he can read their natures and discover their true names. His only desire is to be worshipped by beings he can enslave. That's it. And should they seek to destroy him, in the underground of Neverrealm, behind the doors marked staff only, there is a secret room with a huge water tank, almost like a pool, filled to the brim with filthy, infected water. And in this pool, floating around, are hundreds of plastic bags, sealed plastic bags containing gaming consoles. They all look the same. Which is the reliquary? If the protagonists blow up the place, the building might collapse, and a lot of the mortal children and teens enjoying the games one floor above, innocent people, might die or be crippled for life. If they decide to destroy the reliquary by hand, it'll take at least an hour of investigating the tank in filth-infected waters that are so sickening that even his priests wear protective suits when taking him relics and items to corrupt, right when he imbues them with a little part of his consciousness. How can they defeat this evil? Thank you very much for listening, and I do hope you find this Earthbound as disturbing as me and my players did. Personally, I like making my antagonists very dark, and I like it when they make the players really think about what happened during the game and what it meant to them after the session was over. And, well, this character does that very well, considering the hobby we are all enjoying, right? Role-playing games. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.